Well, Kenya and Tanzania are marking 20 years since the bombing of U.S. embassies in the countries. In Kenya, a memorial is currently being held at the Co-operative House, which hosted the U.S. embassy at the time when terrorists struck. Security has been beefed up across the country. More than 200 people were killed in the Qaeda-linked attack. 12 Americans died, among them 2 employees of the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, who were attached to the embassy. Let's get more on this now. I'm joined by Richard Tuta. He's a security expert joining me here in Nairobi. Thank you and welcome to Africa Live. Now, this was among the very first attacks that Kenya and Tanzania had at the time. There have been quite a number in Kenya since then, but let's just go back to that first one of 1998. How much did that attack at the U.S. Embassy change the security landscape in Kenya?
I can say that a lot have changed in terms of, because 20 years ago, you may realize that this country was caught unaware. It was caught unaware in terms of the fact that it did not have the information of an impending attack. And secondly is that it's a friendly nation, like for instance the US, may have not shared with this country the information that they have, so that the country could have been prepared by then. Like for instance, if you look at what most of the US embassies by then, and especially embassies in Africa, they were just being used as centers to collect information, as centers to collect intelligence information, not centers to consume intelligence information. Because as early as 1996, 1997, if you look at the 9/11 Commission report, you realize that the US intelligence community was very much aware of the presence of Al-Qaeda in this country and the activities that Al-Qaeda was undertaking in this country.
And since then, though, a lot has changed. The U.S. Embassy itself has moved to a more secure location of the city. But since the attack as well, terrorism has become a buzzword across the globe. How much, though, has terrorism itself been evolving, particularly on the continent?
As much as when we talk about terrorism evolving is as a result of so many other factors. One is the factor to do with communication, because changes in communication has also brought about to changes on terrorism strategy. Secondly is the issue to do with the revolution in military affairs. Revolution in military affairs, I mean the changes in warfare. Like for instance, things to do with weaponry. You realize that maybe in future you might even see terrorist organization, if not well changed, using drones, for instance, unlike the traditional ways that they have been using self-made bombs and something like that. The other thing that may even also affect the changing strategy as far as the terrorism is concerned is both internal and external factor. External factors depends on the counter-terror strategy that every nation is adopting. And also the internal factors depends on its own internal organization, and especially where there are individuals that are charismatic within a terrorist organization. So it's a totally different ballgame.
It's a totally different ballgame, though, and mentioning those counterterrorism strategies being employed, particularly by African governments, are you confident that they are strong enough? I mean, the threat of terrorism still lingers. We hear now about Al-Shabaab every so often across the Horn of Africa.
One thing that you may realize is that the strategy of terrorism might remain the same. What might change is the tactics. And what is required with the international community, not just Africa alone. Remember, issues to do with the terrorism is not an African problem, it's a global problem. So terrorism themselves, they have a network. So what is required also of the international community is to come up with a network, because it takes a network to beat a network. Terrorists themselves are well networked. The question that we should be asking ourselves is that, is East Africa community networked? Is Africa as a continent network? Is the international community itself networked? If not, then we still have a problem.
Right, Richard Tuta, thank you very much for joining us on African Live.